Kia ora, I'm Zach Arnold from Sunreturn Records. We are a record label and artist service based in Tamaki, Makaurau. We strive to amplify the work of artists who find freedom in imagining new and unique sounds. And joining me today is Amelia Berry, aka Amamelia. Hello.
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 This is very exciting.
I am very excited for this. It's been on the cards for a while, so thank you for giving it a go. We're going to kind of break down your song Primavera from your new album, Wow. And maybe before we even dive into the sounds, we should talk about kind of what we're seeing in front of us. Why are you using Ableton? What was the choice behind that?
Basically, when I first started recording music, it was extremely utilitarian. I was quite a bad singer-songwriter, and I wanted to record singer-songwritery things. And then I was in a band, and I wanted to record the band. So I was using this very kind of janky DAW called Cakewalk. And I was not it was fine. It's like a budget version of Logic. But I wasn't quite getting anywhere with it. So when I was living with Ruben Totems, rest in peace, love you, Ruben, so much. We were living together and he was just like, look, if you want to keep doing this, I'll show you how to use Ableton. You'll love it. You'll get so much further with it. And yeah, he pretty much sat me down and showed me how to use it, and I haven't really looked back since.
Cool. That's fantastic. What was the intent behind Primavera?
I made this track during the first lockdown, and I had been listening to, I suddenly found myself with a lot of free time kind of trawling through YouTube, kind of, going from track to track, and ended up listening to a whole lot of 90s house music, kind of like Moody Man, New York, kind of Strictly Rhythm kind of stuff, and two, a lot of Balearic, kind of weird chill out Italian stuff. And so I was kind of thinking of both of those things.
Cool.
And
and so we know, maybe could you explain where Primavera sits within the timeline of making Wow?
So the timeline of making Wow is I had a bunch of tracks sitting around, and having been used to being in a band situation where someone says, we need to finish this song so I can show my mum, I not having that, I was just like, well, how do I know when it's finished? I think it sounds okay, but it could probably be better. So I had all of these tracks, and then it was actually talking to you, and you said, oh, well, send me what you've got and we'll see if we can put a release together. And I sent you kind of I think 5 tracks maybe, and you're like, these are all very good, let's put this out. And so that was all exciting and planned, and we put out a single, and then 3 days before lockdown my computer died. The screen stopped turning on, which is quite major, and computer repair services are not an essential service, so the computer was dead with all of the mixes for several months. So I actually I made this track on an old laptop.
And is that where we get I see here in the middle of the screen in yellow, Lockdown Challenge?
That was actually so Lockdown Challenge is I can play it for you if you want. It's just an ambient noise recording. So I was staying at my partner's house on the shore, and I went out to record some kind of like seaside audio, and someone had written in like sticks in this park, "Lockdown Challenge." So I thought it was a decent name for an audio file.
And this is the first sound we hear in the song, right?
Yeah, so this kind of like fades up, and then we get the bass line, which is really what the song is built around. So the Ableton file was originally called Amamelia Cool Bassline Idea.
Let's hear it.
All right. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. What was it? Was it made in computer, or was it?
No. So usually I make a lot of stuff in the box. Just because most of my life I've lived in quite small flats where even if I do have a whole bunch of keyboards, it's a lot of hassle to get them all out and plug them all in, and then that takes up your whole bedroom. So I got really used to making stuff in the box. But one of the nice things about lockdown was that it allowed me to kind of like, I was just going to be in this space, so I could kind of set it up how I wanted. And so this is an old monophonic synth from the 70s made by an Italian brand called Gene. The Gene Synthetone. And so, yeah, I was really excited to play with that. And it kind of has its own difficulties. It's
what do you mean?
So getting the signal right can be a hassle, and it's also very like has really unpredictable transients, which is not something I'm used to with like soft synths. Often, like you usually have the other problem with soft synths where everything sounds a bit kind of like mushy. But these old 70s, it's like every time you hit a key, you get like a. So you can see I'm limiting it quite hard. Yeah. You can see little like bumps here. That is like not usually what you'd want from like a smooth synth bass line.
No, it still sounds very smooth though. I must say. Cool.
Yeah.
And so it's like the combination of that, your lockdown challenge, ambient noise, and the bass to start us off.
Yeah. So it kind of here we go. Those two elements together. Yeah. So kind of the next like big sound that you hear is this crash cymbal. Now, usually crash cymbals are not super exciting, but I got very excited about this crash cymbal sound, which was so I bought an old Casio keyboard.
What make?
Oh wait, so I'll grab it. Oh, here we go. It's a CT370.
Cool.
So this is from, I think it's probably, I would estimate mid 80s. It's really trying really hard to imitate like DX7 style FM synth sounds. But all of the sounds are kind of programmed to have like a little bit too much reverb and sound really weird. But it has a whole like percussion, like you can select percussion and then each key is assigned to a different like percussion instrument. And so I sampled all of those into Ableton, but got particularly obsessed with this one crash cymbal sound. Which is, yeah, it has this weird kind of, so one of the ways that like you can process and repitch samples is it'll take a little slice of it and play it back and forth. And it definitely sounds like there's a bit of that going on.
So this is untreated.
That kind of wavy up and down. How treated is it? It is totally untreated. It has reverb on it.
That's insane.
Yeah, without reverb, it sounds pretty much the same. Yeah, that was the sound coming off the keyboard. I was like extremely excited about it.
it kind of takes me back to high school. I remember we had a lot of keyboards that, would kind of be similar, but definitely not as exciting. Or as high schoolers, we weren't able to kind of wrap our heads around how to like make anything worthwhile
I think
with these individual sounds.
it can be really tough. I remember as a teenager in the music department, they would have like various old Casios, and I'd be like, oh my god, computer sound is so incredible. Computer sound is like, it's like a weird sample and hold synth noise. But obviously, like, if that's just a thing you have and you're kind of like trying to make music in a live scenario, what are you going to do with computer sound? But when you can like sample things, it suddenly makes all of that really useful. Like, I probably won't have this keyboard forever, but I definitely will have that crash sound forever, and I probably will keep the string sound on there forever, which I used quite a bit on the album in the end.
So we start with the crash. What's the next sound we hear?
Then we get into kind of all like a bunch of the drums coming together, but mainly this break. So I sliced that up in Ableton. So Ableton has this really handy automatic slicing feature. There's like, please stop me if I start talking too much about breaks, because I can talk forever about it. So there's basically a lot of different ways to cut up bits of drums. In a DAW, you can slice them up as like just the files. So like you can see with these kick drums are just like kind of sitting free. Or you can pull them into a sampler and it'll cut them up. Or you can do this automatic slicing feature where Ableton will assign each slice to its own little individual mini sampler. So you can kind of like get very hands-on with the sound manipulation. That actually should be about there. Yeah, so this probably after the bass line, the first thing that actually got made was, I would say, this little section of, and then the fill. Yeah.
Very cool.
So between that and the bass line, that was really like the kind of the core of the track.
Shall we just kind of hear a quick 10 seconds of where we are now?
Okay, so what is that going to be? That's going to be the drums and the bass line. And all right, here we go. Yeah. Yeah, so there's like a couple of other elements in there. There's the kick and the clap are both pretty basic 909 samples that I've just like distorted the heck out of. The kick even only just has a filter on it. And there is this bongo sample that I love. So there's a website that is still up that I think is still being updated that looks like it's from about 1998, called Breakbeat Paradise. And they have free sample packs that someone is making, or probably a lot of people are making. And they're these really like kind of gritty, weird samples. And I just love them. I found when I first started making electronic music, it's so easy to make things clean and shiny. Like that's what it's designed to do. And coming from having used like 4 tracks and listening to probably too much shitty lo-fi music, I was like, how do I make this sound dirtier? And one of the solutions I found was going to breakbeatparadise.com. Yeah.
It's such a good. I think the bongos really like bring a bit of energy to the track.
Bongos are really, they're a really handy drum element because they sit in a place like in the sonic sandwich of drum sounds. They sit in a place that not a lot of other drums are in. So you can kind of have the bongos going crazy and it just adds a bit of vibiness to it. Doesn't like totally change the groove.
I think from memory, kind of the next sound that comes in, there's like a laser kind of sound.
Oh yeah, there is a wait. Where's my laser? It looks like this is the laser. Oh, it is even called Zap. So this is sampled from. Oh yeah, I have a Blofeld drums sample pack that has a bunch of kind of like extremely analog drum sounds. So the laser is in this track, and also there is a crash from that. We will hear later on.
Yes, that was great.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting because like those are processed so much more than that weird crash from the Casio. It makes you think.
So what do we have on the laser noises? Is that what we're seeing down below?
Yeah, so the laser noises are running through this. This is just an EQ to take out the really low frequencies. Basically, most sounds have a bunch of kind of inaudible low end stuff happening that just it basically just ends up adding sound to your mix that you're not hearing. It just kind of means that everything else ends up being quieter and like a bit murky. So almost every sound on here has an EQ and just dragging the low shelf up until it starts to change what it actually sounds like in your ears, and then you pull it back a little bit. And that just keeps everything kind of like, I know I said before I wanted everything to sound dirty, but I also kind of want it. You lose a lot of space in your mix if you have a lot of low kind of noise. Okay. Then there is just this, this is just an Ableton utility. So it has like a volume thing and a pan thing. And so this has some automation on the panning. I'm not sure if this is actually in effect here. Yeah, it is. There you go. So the lasers go from side to side. I find it easier to do it in the utility because if you want to mess with something on the actual, sorry, I shouldn't be pointing with my hands. If you want to, so like if you automate your volume on your utility, then it means that you can just turn the overall thing up and down and it's not going to like mess with your like relative automation. Gain staging. There's probably something to do with that. There's also this phaser, just adding a bit of vibiness. And for some reason, I used a second utility for the gain. That's just unnecessary. That was probably a bad move. But they don't take up much CPU, so you can just throw like 20 of them on if you really want to have some gain staging. Yeah. There are some other sounds in here. What else have we got? Oh, this is where all the synths come in.
Yes.
And also one thing that we haven't talked about so far is the voice, which sounds like this. So that kind of gets a little bit, that's like kind of blends in a lot with the cymbal sound. Yeah, and that is Madison from Baby Teeth and, of course, Moody V and the Menstrual Cycle, incredible band, singing it into her cell phone and sending me a voice memo, which was very handy. There's a few of those on the album.
And why Primavera?
It's just quite a nice word. It means springtime in Italian. And I'm trying to think because there's a Botticelli painting of Primavera that's very cool. And I sometimes think about, so I might have been considering that. That basically came right at the end. I'd made the whole track and I was like, there's something missing from this. It's a woman whispering springtime.
It's a really good addition.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so the next thing you hear as we're coming into it, let's go from the, I'm going to mute some of these things. And then the drum roll. Is the flute. I got mildly obsessed with this flute sound. It's from a thing called a Chamberlain, which is like basically when the mellotron was invented, someone simultaneously invented the mellotron, like the same thing, but he was called Chamberlain. So it's like it's a different thing, and the sounds on it are all quite different. So that like the mellotron flute is it's the flute sound from like later Beatles tracks, like Strawberry Fields Forever, the kind of like whoop whoop whoop. But the Chamberlain flute is much less. It kind of sucks to use it for chords because it has a lot more like breathiness and kind of like flute sound to it. So basically how these instruments work is that for each note on the keyboard, there would be a tape loop that had a recording of someone playing that note on the instrument. So when you hit the key, it would play the flute. Yeah, let's listen to how that sounds. Yeah, so you can see that, like, you can hear that, like, each different note has like quite a different character to it. Because yeah, so the mellotron one is very uniform. Like they clearly spent a lot of time getting this person to play it like you played the C sharp. But the Chamberlain one gets kind of dirty. And that also has a phaser on it.
For the vibe.
And also has a low sharp. Yeah, for the vibe. I mean, a lot of what the phaser is doing on this track, not so much on the laser sounds. I was trying to think of like the real name for them. It's just laser sounds. Is giving it a little bit of like stereo energy. Because it's like I wanted the flute like right in the center because it's the lead. And it can sound a bit like blocky and not really fit into the rest of the mix if you don't kind of like put a bit of stereo modulation-y stuff on it. Yeah, it just has a saturator, which I could go into, but basically makes it louder. And it has some slight bit reduction on it, which basically kind of makes it sound a little bit more digital. It's quite a subtle difference. But it gives it like a little bit more of a harder edge because there's like less information. You lose a bit of the subtlety in the like kind of in the volume movement, so it hits like a little bit harder, which I like. Yeah.
How did you come up with the lead line, like the melody?
I played it on the computer keyboard with this one. Yeah, I kind of had. I've done that once or twice, and it's worked out. Most of the time, I find that incredibly difficult. So yeah, it was kind of a process of like playing some stuff in on the computer keyboard, and then I got something that I was more or less okay with, and I had to kind of go away and like hash it out a little bit on the Casio CT370, which yeah, it's nice to have a keyboard like this Casio floating around because it has an internal speaker. You can just plug it in and play some stuff. It's not like a professional synthesizer where you have to like plug it into your amp and reset all the settings and stuff.
Yeah. And I see, I mean, once the flute comes in, we also start getting the strings.
Yes, so we get these strings, which are the Arco strings, which are kind of like a famous string preset from the Roland D50. Which you can see me looking up on the side because I couldn't remember if it was the D50 or the E20. Yeah, and so those are like I'm like, how much do I need to explain the history of like keyboards and synthesis? Because
As much as
I
you'd
get
like.
really nerdy about it. Yeah, basically like the next big thing after FM synthesis came along in the like, well, it came along in the late 70s. No one really did it until the early 80s. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, you get this like linear algorithmic synthesis where they're like combining like samples with kind of like various weird kinds of digital synthesis to get these like faux realistic sounds. I mean, I guess that's what synthesis has always been doing, but if you grew up in the 90s, these sounds are very kind of familiar to you. People used this kind of like a lot if they didn't have an orchestra budget. Yeah.
I wanted to note that like along with the like bongo sounds that get it driving, the strings kind of bring in a bit of tension. There's like
Yeah. Well, I think so. Like one of the things that is like exciting for me about having just like a very repetitive bass line is that you get to play a lot with like harmonic tension. That sounds extremely pretentious, but if you have like a proper chord progression, then people kind of like figure out where it's going. But there's a really nice thing when you have like a really stable bass line that you can kind of like make the harmony and the chords that sit on top of that do some like weird stuff. So yeah, the strings by themselves sound really dark.
there's like
It's like
a
almost gothic.
yeah. There was like one chord at the end of the loop or progression that's like a yeah, that really drives in that extra tension. It's like, ooh, that's
Yeah, it does. I mean, it does this little like semitone move from F to F sharp, which is yeah over a B flat. That's quite there's there's some music theory drama happening there.
yeah.
Yeah. What is that? A minor sixth? Yeah. It's the it's not quite the devil's chord, but it's similar.
We're getting close.
Yeah. And then yeah. And then there's also this kind of quite fun organ sound.
Ooh.
Yeah. Which
I thought that was like a conga or something like that you had played with.
No, it's like just a very like percussive organ. I mean, it's called Yamaha released a bunch of like sample packs, like really, really nice fancy sample packs for some of their like heritage instruments. And the DX7 one has a bunch of their famous sounds, but they all have different names, which is really confusing. So this one is called Organ Eyes, which it could well have been called, but I feel like it's probably called something more along the lines of percussive organ, perk organ. Yeah, so that has a lot of the similar stuff to everything else. It's got a chorus on it. This one has its own reverb, which I don't do a lot, but I really wanted the sound to sound. So the DX7 is extremely 80s, and I wanted to like bring it into more of that like 90s house territory. And so many of the like the romplers and the synths that they used had like built-in effects, and so everything had like reverb on it before it went anywhere else. So that's why I've got the reverb going into the saturator. I get extremely nerdy about this stuff. I'm sorry.
Do not be sorry. This is what we're here for.
So those together sound like this. And then we're just about to add a new note on the strings. Yeah.
Cool. So
that took a long time to come up with, and it only ends up being like 30 seconds of the song, but
whatever, however long it takes, it takes.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's the art that's next.
The next, it does kind of like a big change.
Yes.
To so let's listen to that quickly with the flute as well.
Yeah.
This is kind of everything all together. Yeah, and then so next we kind of do another kind of. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so I wanted that flute line to be the star of the show, and I thought it would be nice to kind of cut everything out and like reharmonize it a little bit, because I wanted it to have, I mean, I guess it is a dance track, like it has a lot of 4 to the floor in it, but I wanted sections of it to have the feel of some of that like kind of like buzzy new agey synth stuff, like Susan Ciani kind of a thing. So it goes down to just the bongos, and then it has these arps, which are not actually arps. It's me playing again that Gen 70s keyboard. And so because this was a real instrument going into the thing, I did all the processing on the way in. There was not a lot of processing, but I think it went through a delay pedal, and possibly a chorus pedal. And so you have these kind of individual things that don't sound like a lot, but then they're like hard panned. Yeah, so there's 3 of those. And then all together they give this kind of like nice effect. But there's like, I got that specific synth sound. I find it's really hard. It's like extremely easy for this old equipment to do it. Like it's what the old equipment wants to do. And so I find soft synths, they just don't like it. Their square wave sounds are just not, they're not into it. So altogether those 3 are this. Yeah. Maybe listening to too much Plantasia.
I was going to say that's very nice.
Yeah.
that little section.
Thank you.
And then, so have the drums changed, or are they still?
They basically kind of just drop out. So the drums that we've heard so far are almost all of the drums through the whole track, and they don't change a lot. But bringing certain ones in and taking certain ones out, they really like changes the feel a lot. So once it goes down to just the bongos, like it feels a lot more kind of floaty. You lose that like 4 to the floor kick snare. And so that kind of goes into a bunch more hardware stuff coming up. I was just so excited to have it all laid out in front of me.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into that.
Okay, so sorry, there's still the drums. Yeah, so you have these pads. So this one, I basically played one really long chord, and then I like resampled that within Ableton so that I could use, I don't know, basically sampler. So there's like a different sound to when you play something through a sampler. Because when you like repitch the notes, it like essentially like thinks about it differently than if you're like doing it on a synthesizer. And I really love pads through a sampler rather than like sitting down and playing out all of the chords. Yeah, so that's just basically all the sounds coming up are a Korg mini log. So there's also this one. Quite spooky. Yeah, so we've got those together along with the kick and the bongos. Yeah, it's almost it almost has like a kind of exotica vibe at that point.
And it's a total shift from where we started as well.
Yeah, totally. And it just like, I mean, once that bass line disappears, you kind of have this whole other section where the drums are kind of like a nice constant. The drums basically do kind of more or less the same thing, which keeps it being like the same track. But I really played with, I wanted it to make a real like harmonic departure because like the Balearic stuff that I'd been listening to, I was noticing that like a lot of, especially like 12-inch remixes of songs, it would be like a song for a couple of minutes and then it would be like, okay, we're just gonna kind of go somewhere else now. The keyboard player is gonna have like a nice holiday and it's just gonna be like, yeah. So then we also, coming into this section, we have these other two mini log things panned kind of hard left and right that are doing weird bend things. I wanted them to sound like distant seagulls.
In my notes, I had said that they kind of sound like sirens, or distant
totally.
seagulls is much better.
A lot of this, I think once I got that like lockdown challenge sample, a lot of it I was like, oh, it's kind of about the seaside. So a lot of those sounds, and we'll see coming up, there's this waves part, which is synthesized waves. So then the next big change we have is kind of all the drums come back in. So we have this shaker added, which is also from Breakbeat Paradise. And I guess the two main things are these like very truncated 909 toms. So they're all like, you can see they're all like cut to just kind of cut off. And this.
So what's going on with this fried percussion?
So this is like, I couldn't like show you what actually went into this because it's been resampled so many times. But basically I was listening to, I think it was something that like Durham had been making.
Durham being Green Grove.
Being Green Grove. There was like an Instagram thing where people were posting what they'd been making. And it was, I could be totally misremembering this, but this is how it is in my mind. It's something to do with Durham and to do with techno sounds. Yeah. And these like really kind of like cool, kind of like spooky, thin, digitized drum sounds. And I was like, I have no, I probably there are like sample packs and stuff. I was like, I'm going to make one of these from scratch. So it was basically a drum break that I heavily filtered and like put through really hard flanger and like digitized, bit crushed the heck out of, and then sliced it into these bits and then kind of like recut again and put it through like another echo and made these like, these little drum fills with it. You can, they're like more or less recognizable drum sounds, but I wanted them to sound really kind of like crushed and weird.
And so does that mirror the toms, but just with that extra processing?
Well, so the toms are playing like quite a constant rhythm, and this is essentially like fills for the tom rhythm. So together it's like... yeah, it kind of like adds a little bit of color. Like they're not really, it's not really a rhythmic element. It's kind of more of like a sprinkle on top. But that was mainly there because I wanted to see if I could make that sound, and it's not really exactly the sound that I had in my mind. But I'm fairly happy with that.
That's good.
Yeah. So you have coming into, let's unsolo things. Coming into this section, you have like a lot of the drum elements come back in, along with the really insistent toms. And it kind of feels like we're building up to go back into the main body of the track, but we don't. We go into a whole other weird thing. The weird thing continues, as you can see, for a little while. So we have these synthesizer waves. Are those playing? Yeah? Okay. So that's made on a soft synth in Ableton. It's great. It's free. The OBXD. I love it. So it's just the noise channel, with a lot of stuff happening with the filter and like a loudness envelope. And so there's two, and they are different, and they're panned hard, and it's my waves. I already had real waves. I wanted synth waves. That also comes from listening to, a lot of that kind of like 70s new age synth stuff. There's a lot of creating natural sounds with synthesizers, which I find extremely fascinating. A lot of people can't play the flute but can play the keyboard, but you can just go and record waves. It's not really hard. And people are like, no, I'm going to spend an hour and a half making this sound like a wave. And
they didn't have the luxury of like finding a YouTube clip and just ripping that.
Totally. So we get this kind of, and we also get the addition of this little woodblock sound, which is called what does that even say? Electribo. It's, I believe it's from, the MC303. There you go. From the drum kit mega bundle. people are going to be seeing my samples folder and being like, this is totally mental. But
hey,
I like sounds.
If it works for you, who cares?
Thank you.
What everyone else does.
Fueling my addiction to sample sounds. So that sounds like this. So I just panned those, and I automated the delay so that it gets more feedbacky. So there's this kind of like build up in intensity as you get more and more echoes. Yeah.
And does that kind of bring us to another section?
Yeah, so that along with these, sorry, there's so much stuff going on this track. So there's like I sampled the flute melody from earlier and messed with it. Yeah. It's just like distorted and filtered and with several delays on it. So we're in my idea for this part is that it's kind of like almost like a dream version of like, I guess, what is the actual like melody. And so everything kind of like builds in intensity. And then we get a full stop for a very long time until the bass comes back in. We also have more Breakbeat Paradise samples. which I think is a plane taking off.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, and then so we get into kind of like the final part of the song, which is just, it's basically everything from before, but more so. So we get all of the elements coming in one by one. Yeah, you can hear a lot more of that freaky techno drum thing. And we've added this ride cymbal from the Roland Compu drum. And we've got the Amen break happening as well. That has a rising filter on it. So it sounds like a kind of a kettle boiling. Yeah.
Really, like, it seems like the emphasis on like controlling tension and release is, well, like that is something that, I'm just describing dance music, aren't I? Just
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, yeah, as I said before, like I came relatively late to the game to dance music as being like something I thought I could make or knew how to make. Like I was like a punk indie person for so long, and just the way that you structure songs is so different. Like a lot of really great pop songs will just have one idea, but most songs people write, there's like three ideas that are like three different kind of like melody ideas or like riffs that are like the start of the song, and then the chorus is like totally different, and then they'll have to have a bridge as well, which could be like a couple of different things going on. But with like an electronic track, you really just need like some kind of rhythmic idea. If it's a track, if it's not ambient music, you probably need some kind of melodic idea, even if that's just a bass line. And then it's just kind of how long can you string that out for using tension and release. And so I have a lot of fun playing with those things because it's, I still make a lot of kind of indie and kind of pop punk kind of music, and it's nice to not have to be like, how is this going to transition into the chorus, and instead be like, I'm going to make you feel like something needs to happen, and then nothing's going to happen, and then I'm going to make you feel like that again. Or something happens, it's a drop.
Yeah. How does the song go down live?
I've only got to do it once live because it was a lockdown thing. It's pretty mellow because it's 120 BPM, which is, I don't know, like disco BPM. Like it's like a kind of would be kind of a slowish, like I guess like a medium for like a house track. But it has like an extremely mellow vibe, so it's danceable, but it's like it's kind of nice as like as an intro track, kind of building into something.
And I guess the flute really draws you in, right?
I think that bit is extremely groovy. Like people really get down to that. This bit is a bit more like. A little bit vibey. I mean, this is essentially the whole track. I was kind of like agonizing for a while over how to end it. Like initially it went back to that section in its entirety, and I thought I was about to make a hero's journey analogy. I'm just gonna do it. So it's like the hero's journey. I know that guy is a dick, but whatever. It's a fine way to understand things. You go out on this quest and you are trying to find something to bring back to your home, but then like you get so changed on the journey that when you come back, I was like, we've gone through so much in this track that you can't just come back to like the little groovy organ. You have to you have to have this like really munted version of the flute line that's kind of just the yeah. And then it basically it ends by kind of really pushing that tension. It has this is a trick I use a lot if people want some Amamelia style rises. It is yeah, it's basically one synth note that kind of increases in pitch, but it's through a ring modulator. So that it sounds extremely munted.
And so, and why do you use that to finish?
I usually would use it before a drop, but I kind of like the idea of the drop of the song being that the song ends. Like you're kind of like dropped back into the world. So like it's you can kind of hear it building volume. Like it almost sounds like a person going, oh. But it just, I don't know, there's like certain kinds of sounds that just make people tense. And there's something kind of like about the dissonance of a ring modulator. Ring modulators are really hard to explain what they do. They basically are like a kind of an inharmonic modulator. So like most effects that you add to things, they make it sound a bit more nice by adding in some like complementary, like slightly off tune, but in a way that's like nice because it sounds like people singing together kind of a vibe. Whereas a ring modulator is like the most like some electrical engineer was like, I could really fuck this shit up. And it just, yeah.
They're a great thing to have on your pedal board, just to like have that one pedal that you can't really control. It's like, let's see what this does.
Yeah, well, it's so exciting because like, yeah, again, with most things, it's like as you change your note, they change in a nice way. Whereas it's totally unpredictable with a ring modulator because it's about, you hear like the sum and the difference of the notes as like numerical values essentially. So it's very like maths music and not ears music. Yeah, but it's great for rises.
It's great for ending songs.
It is great for ending songs. Yeah, so it just ends with the kind of the bass. Oh, that was still solid. Ends with the bass and that crash and the Primavera. So it's kind of like it does take you back to the start. Yeah, that's the song.
That's the song.
It's only 36 tracks long.
Which, I mean, when we were talking about selecting which song from Well to talk about, this seemed like a good middle ground, right? Not too crazy, not too minimal.
Yeah, it doesn't have... So there were a couple of tracks, like particularly Fried Percussion, where I was like, I can't show you what I did to this because it has been resampled so many times. And a lot of the... how would you describe it? I guess like the darker sounding tracks, the kind of the grittier sounding tracks, a lot of the sounds I will like make a sound. So it'll just be like one note or one chord on a synthesizer or maybe a drum pattern, and that'll get really, really processed. And then I will record that and then pull that sound into a sampler. And then I might do the same thing to that sound. And so you get these layers of kind of processing. I
guess finally, how did the song change between the mix and the master?
So the mastering process for WoW was fairly light, but I really it's weird talking about mastering. I feel like such like kind of almost out of my depth, but I mean I did it and it sounds fine, I think. Like I mean often mastering can really change a song, but I was just looking to add a bit of kind of warmth, like sounding like a bit squashy, a little bit like old. I'm always jealous of people who make music that sounds like it was made recently.
Yeah.
Everything I make, I'm like, yeah, no, it needs to sound like 1983. So I ran it through. Wait, can I grab it? It's
Of course. Yeah.
So for the master, I basically got all the tracks at -6, which is nice, gives you a bit of headroom.
Yes.
I did a little bit of EQing to get out some like nasty stuff. I did some stereo widening to make everything a bit lush. And then I ran everything through this mixer from the deep past. That's all like all the pots are scratchy, the channels. If you put the knobs in the same place, that's not the same volume. Like everything is extremely analog, and so you have to fiddle with everything. It has an overall EQ that is just bass and treble. And I honestly drove everything into this really hard.
Yeah.
And I prefer that to, I mean, I'm happy with like saturation plugins and stuff for individual tracks, but I feel like for the master, you get a kind of a really like an organic lived in feel with something like this. And then I did some boring stuff after it, like limiting it and multi-band compression and stuff, but no one wants to hear about that. It's all about the Korg KMX8.
Definitely will be heading to Trade Me or Reverb to try and track one of those down. Or at least you
got to get a vintage mixer. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, I just like the size of them as well. Like, yeah, but that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
Amamelia, thank you so much. I was thinking maybe a good way to finish this video would be with that that final tension. Let's play us out on
The whole thing or just the tense parts?
Just the tense part.
All right,
let's do it.
Okay. Here we go. Oh wait, no, sorry. I totally mucked that up. I'm just gonna play the things that have the rising energy, and we're gonna deal with it. And the crash. Here we go.